The street was a blur of noise, lights flashing red and green as cars honked and pedestrians hurried across the crosswalk. Standing on the edge of the crowded intersection, Alex felt paralyzed, the chaos of the city suffocating him. The blinking lights and murmurs of people's voices swirled around him, each sound blending into a maddening hum. For a moment, he wondered if he'd make it across. Then, from the cacophony, a calm, gentle voice broke through. "Do you need some help?" He turned to see a woman standing beside him, her face serene yet assured, with a white cane in one hand tapping lightly against the ground. The realization struck him. She was blind, and here she was, offering to help him. Yes," he stammered, startled. "Thank you, I just lost track of the light." She gave him a knowing smile, taking a small step forward. "No problem. Follow me." Her voice was steady, with a tone that exuded confidence as though she knew exactly where she was going, even if she couldn't see it. They crossed together, and Alex noticed the way she walked with her head held high, the rhythmic tap of her cane keeping time as they moved. She seemed so sure of herself, so grounded in a way that unnerved him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he knew her voice. When they reached the other side, she paused and turned toward him. "There you go," she said, her smile bright yet distant. "Thank you," he replied, his words catching as he heard her voice again, clearer now. A spark of familiarity flickered in his mind, and he took a sharp breath. "Emily?" Her smile faltered slightly, and she tilted her head, her expression shifting as if she, too, was searching for recognition. "Yes, that's me," she replied slowly. "Do we know each other?" For a moment, Alex felt his heart lurch. Memories he had long buried began to surface. The high school hallways, the mocking laughter of his friends, and a quiet girl whose face always seemed downcast. And now, here she was, standing before him, someone he had never thought he'd see again. The guilt hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Yes, we went to high school together," he said quietly, shame threading his words. He could see her expression change, a subtle shift as recognition settled in. "Alex Winters," she murmured, almost to herself. Her tone was neutral, but he could see a hint of guardedness in her eyes, as though she were bracing herself for something unpleasant. An awkward silence stretched between them. He wanted to say something, to explain, to apologize, but the words seemed trapped in his throat. He could see the pain she was holding back, the wounds he had once caused. Emily, I'm sorry," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I'm truly sorry." She nodded slowly, her gaze distant as though she were looking at something far. "Certainly. Here's the continuation," keeping the tension and suspense building as Alex grapples with his emotions and Emily processes his unexpected apology. Emily nodded slowly, her gaze distant, fixed on a point far beyond Alex's face. Her silence pressed down on him like a weight, making each second feel like an eternity. He could see the flicker of memories playing behind her eyes, fragments of a shared past they had never truly shared. "An apology," she murmured, almost to herself. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, a subtle sharpness that told him she wasn't entirely ready to accept his words. An apology is a nice place to start, I suppose, though sometimes words don't mean as much as actions. Her response stung, yet Alex couldn't blame her. He felt the weight of those words sink in. There was a gulf between them, a vast chasm carved by years of painful memories and unspoken remorse. "Emily, I don't expect you to forgive me, not after what I put you through," he admitted, his voice raw. I had to say something, to let you know I'm not the person I was back then." Her face softened for a brief moment, a flash of something almost like sympathy, before the guarded expression returned. "People change," she replied, her tone cautious. "Or at least that's what I've been told." They stood there in the bustle of the sidewalk, silent once more, the crowd around them swirling past as if they were invisible. Alex felt rooted to the spot, unsure of how to move forward. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked, the words spilling out before he could stop himself. "I don't expect anything, really. Just maybe a chance to talk?" Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening around her cane. She seemed to consider his offer, weighing it carefully. He could see the reluctance in her expression, the hesitation of someone who had been hurt too many times to trust easily. Finally, she sighed, giving a small nod. "One coffee. Just to talk." Relief flooded through Alex, though he knew this was just the beginning. A small, fragile opening that could close at any moment if he wasn't careful. The cafe they chose was a quiet spot a few blocks away, with warm lighting and a lingering aroma of roasted beans. They sat across from each other at a small, round table, the atmosphere filled with an awkward tension that neither seemed to know how to break. Emily's hands moved over her cup, her fingers tracing the rim as though she were drawing comfort from its warmth. Alex watched her, his mind racing, trying to find a way to say everything he needed to without pushing her away. "Emily, I know this doesn't fix anything," he began, struggling to find the right words. "But I want you to know. I regret everything. The things I did, the things I said, they were wrong. I was wrong." She raised an eyebrow, her face impassive. "Why now, Alex? Why say all of this now, after so many years?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of her question. Why now? It was a fair question, one he hadn't fully answered for himself. "I guess, because I realized that avoiding the past didn't erase it," he admitted, his voice low. "I thought if I could just move forward, I wouldn't have to face what I'd done. But seeing you, it brought everything back. I can't pretend it didn't happen." She took a slow sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. "It's strange, isn't it? How something that seemed so trivial to you could be so life-changing for someone else?" Her words stung, but Alex knew he deserved them. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I never thought about the impact I had on you. I was selfish and scared. I was too wrapped up in my own insecurities to even think about how you felt." A shadow passed over her face, her fingers still tracing the edge of her cup. "I used to wonder if it was something I did, if I somehow invited the bullying, but after a while I realized that people like you, like the person you were back then, they needed someone to pick on, someone they could project their own pain onto." The truth in her words hit him hard, the guilt he'd been carrying for years pressing down on him even more. "I can't change the past," he said quietly, "but I want to do better. I want to prove that I'm not that person anymore." Emily studied him, her expression softening ever so slightly. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, the kind of resilience that came from years of learning to stand on her own. "I suppose actions speak louder than words," she said finally, giving him a small, measured nod. "Let's see if you mean what you say." Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emily met a few more times, their conversations filled with tentative words and careful silences. He could tell she was still holding back, still guarded, but there were moments when he saw a glimmer of the person she had become, strong, confident, self-assured. One afternoon, while they were talking about her work, Emily mentioned a community project she was planning, a support group for visually impaired children in the city. "I want them to have a space where they feel seen," she explained, her voice tinged with a passion that made Alex's heart ache with admiration. "A place where they don't have to worry about fitting in or being different." The idea struck a chord with Alex, and before he could think it over, he found himself offering, "Can I help? I mean, if you need it." She looked surprised, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "Help?" she repeated, as if testing the word. "Yeah," he said, feeling a rush of eagerness. "I want to be a part of it. Whatever you need, sponsors, volunteers, anything. Let me help make this happen." Emily hesitated, her expression thoughtful as she studied him. "Are you sure? It's not easy work. There's a lot involved." "I'm sure," he replied, his voice firm. "I want to help, Emily, and I mean it." She nodded slowly, the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "All right, then. Let's see if you're up to the challenge." As the days went by, Alex and Emily became unlikely partners, working side by side on the project. The work was intense, requiring countless hours of planning, outreach, and coordination. Alex found himself diving into it with a zeal he hadn't expected, pouring his energy into making the project a success. Through the long hours and late-night meetings, Alex began to see a side of Emily he had never known before, a passionate, driven woman who was fiercely protective of the children she worked with. She had a way of connecting with them, of understanding their struggles, that left him in awe. One evening, after a particularly long planning session, Alex turned to her, a mixture of admiration and curiosity in his eyes. "Emily, you're incredible. The way you connect with these kids, I don't know how you do it." She shrugged, a faint smile touching her lips. "I guess I see a bit of myself in them. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like you don't belong." Her words hit him deeply, and he felt a surge of guilt for the part he'd played in making her feel that way. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything I did, I wish I could take it all back." Emily looked at him, her gaze steady. "We can't change the past, Alex," she replied softly. "But maybe we can learn from it." They held each other's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. In that moment, Alex felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance that, while he couldn't erase his mistakes, he could work to be a better person moving forward. As their project continued, so did their tentative friendship. Alex could sense that Emily's guard was slowly lowering, her laughter coming more easily, her smiles lingering just a little longer. They began to share more of their lives outside of the project, their conversations moving from work to more personal topics. One evening, while they were reviewing some final plans, Emily shared a story from her past, how she had hidden her blindness for years, even from her family. "It was easier to pretend," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I thought that if people didn't know, they wouldn't treat me differently. But eventually, the truth came out. And it made things even harder." Alex listened, his heart heavy with regret. He realized then just how little he had known about her, how much he had missed by failing to see her as a person, rather than a target. "You didn't deserve any of it," he said softly, his voice filled with remorse. "Not from me, not from anyone." Emily nodded, her expression contemplative. "Maybe not, but I learned a lot from it. It taught me to rely on myself, to build my own strength." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of their shared past hanging between them. For the first time, Alex felt like he was truly seeing Emily, her strength, her resilience, her kindness, and he knew, without a doubt, that he wanted to be worthy of her trust, to prove to her that he had changed. Their journey was far from over, but in that moment he felt a sense of hope, a fragile, tentative hope that perhaps they could build something meaningful from the ashes of their shared pain. It was late, and the project deadline loomed closer than ever. The community event was in just over a week, and the weight of finalizing every detail bore down on them both. They were working out of Emily's small apartment, where the walls were lined with poster boards, event schedules, and checklists scribbled in her precise, neat handwriting. Alex felt a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion as he double-checked a list of sponsors they had finally secured after weeks of outreach. Emily leaned back on the couch, exhaling slowly. "We're almost there," she murmured, a smile touching her lips. "Just a few more days, and this will all come together." Alex nodded, glancing over at her with a smile of his own. "It'll be worth it. These kids are going to have something amazing because of you." Emily's smile faded slightly, her expression growing pensive. She traced her fingers along the fabric of the couch, her eyes distant. "You know, I always dreamed of doing something like this," she admitted quietly. "Back in high school, when I felt invisible, I'd imagine creating a place where kids who felt like me could belong, a place where they wouldn't be ignored or underestimated." He watched her, struck by the vulnerability in her voice. She rarely opened up like this, and he didn't want to break the moment. "You're doing it, Emily," he said softly. You're giving them what you never had." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "It's funny," she said, almost to herself. "I never thought someone like you would be sitting here with me, helping me make this happen." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Alex swallowed, feeling the familiar ache of guilt twisting in his chest. "I can't change what I did," he said, his voice raw. "But I want to be part of what you're building. I want to help create something meaningful, something real, and I'm grateful you're giving me the chance." Emily studied him, her expression unreadable, as if weighing his words carefully. "Alex, I do believe you've changed," she said finally, her tone soft but firm. "But forgiveness isn't a switch you can just flip. It's a process, and there are still days when I remember." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "I understand," he replied quietly. "I don't expect you to forget. I don't even expect you to fully forgive me. I just want to show you that I'm here and that I'm not the same person I was." A brief silence fell between them, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Emily leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder why you were like that? Why you felt the need to hurt people?" The question caught him off guard, and he felt a pang of discomfort. He had thought about it, of course, countless times, lying awake at night, questioning the choices that had led him to become someone he barely recognized. "Yes," he admitted, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I was insecure, weak, and I guess I thought that if I could make someone else feel small, I wouldn't feel so worthless." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "It was a terrible thing to do, and I'm ashamed of it." Emily nodded, her expression softened. "I think we're all just trying to survive," she said quietly. "Sometimes people do things they regret in order to feel strong. But real strength, it's facing those regrets and choosing to be better." Her words touched him, a reminder of how much she had grown, how resilient she had become. For a moment he was filled with an overwhelming respect for her, for the strength she possessed that he had once dismissed. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, "for saying that, for letting me try to make things right." She offered a small smile, her eyes warm. "I think you're already on your way, Alex." As the event drew closer, Alex and Emily spent even more time together, their partnership evolving into a comfortable rhythm. They'd shared late nights working on logistics, early mornings calling sponsors, and countless hours setting up spaces, hanging posters, and coordinating volunteers. In each moment, Alex felt his admiration for Emily deepen. She was focused, driven, and seemed to carry an endless well of empathy. One evening, as they were finalizing the seating arrangement, a sudden flash of memory struck Alex, vivid and unbidden. It was a moment from high school, one he hadn't thought of in years. He was struggling with his grades, quietly, of course, because to admit weakness was unacceptable among his group of friends. One afternoon, a teacher had pulled him aside, telling him that someone had recommended he get extra help, that someone had noticed he'd been struggling. At the time, he had brushed it off, embarrassed and irritated by the attention. But now, as the memory surfaced, he realized it had been Emily who had mentioned it to the teacher, who had noticed his struggles even when he had been oblivious to hers. "Emily," he began, his voice hesitant, "do you remember, back in high school, when I was struggling with my grades?" She looked at him, her face softening. "Yes, I remember." Did you tell Mrs. Finch about it? Were you the one who asked her to help me?" A faint smile touched her lips and she nodded. "You never noticed, but I always watched people. I saw things others didn't." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet sadness. "I thought, maybe if I helped you, you'd see me as a person. I was naive, I guess." The weight of her words crushed him, the guilt suffusing every part of him. She had extended kindness to him, had noticed his struggles and tried to help, and in return he had made her life miserable. "Emily, I don't know how to make this right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You deserved so much better. You didn't deserve any of it." She looked away, her gaze focused on some distant point beyond the room. Maybe I didn't, she replied softly, but it happened, and all we can do now is learn from it, move forward. The words hit him hard, their simplicity masking the complexity of the emotions beneath. He wanted to make things right, to somehow erase the pain he had caused, but he knew that wasn't possible. All he could do was try to be the person she deserved to know, to give her the friendship and respect she had once been denied. They worked in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken emotions settling over them. But as the evening wore on, he felt a sense of peace begin to blossom, a tentative, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they were on the path to something healing. The day of the event finally arrived, and the venue was alive with energy. The room was filled with children and families, laughter and chatter filling the air as everyone came together to celebrate the new community center. Emily moved through the crowd with a quiet grace, her smile lighting up every child's face, her presence a source of comfort and joy. Alex watched her from across the room, his heart swelling with pride and admiration. She was everything he hadn't seen back then, strong, compassionate, radiant. He knew he'd only glimpsed a fraction of her strength, that the woman she had become was a testament to her resilience and determination. As the event went on, Alex found himself helping where he could, guiding families, answering questions, and watching Emily inspire others. She was in her element here, and it was clear the children looked up to her, saw her as a role model. Toward the end of the event, a young boy who had recently lost his sight approached Emily, his small hand reaching out. "Miss Emily," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'm scared that no one will see me for who I am anymore." Emily knelt down beside him, her voice soft and reassuring. "You're not alone," she told him, her words laced with a quiet strength. "People will see you for exactly who you are, and the ones who matter, they'll see you for all the wonderful things that make you, you." The boy smiled, his fears easing, and Alex felt a lump form in his throat. He realized in that moment just how much of an impact Emily had, not just on him, but on everyone around her. After the last of the guests left and the room began to empty, Alex approached her, his heart full. "Emily, this was incredible. You've done something amazing here." She smiled, exhaustion and pride etched into her face. "Thank you, Alex, and thank you for being part of this. I didn't think we'd ever—" Her voice trailed off, as if the words were too big, too complex to capture. Alex reached out, gently covering her hand with his own. "We've come a long way," he said quietly, "and I'm grateful for every moment of it." She looked at him, her gaze steady, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of something more, a trust that hadn't been there before, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection they'd built. In that moment, Alex knew that while forgiveness was a journey, they had taken the first steps together, and he was ready to continue that journey no matter where it led. The day after the event, Alex found himself standing in front of Emily's apartment building with a bag of pastries and 2 coffees. He hadn't planned on dropping by, but the quiet joy from yesterday's success lingered, and he wanted to share it with her, to express his gratitude in person. Emily opened the door, her expression softening as she saw him standing there. "You didn't have to do this," she said, though she was clearly pleased. He smiled, holding out the coffee. "After everything yesterday, I figured we could both use a break. And breakfast." They settled onto her couch, the morning light streaming through the windows. A comfortable silence fell between them, and Alex found himself savoring the peace. For so long he had been haunted by guilt and remorse, but now, sitting here with Emily, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't known he was missing. After a while, Emily broke the silence. "Yesterday was something special," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Those kids left with smiles on their faces. That's everything I could have hoped for." "You did that, Emily," Alex replied, his gaze warm. "You gave them a place to belong, something I know you didn't always have back then." She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Maybe that's why it means so much to me. When I was younger, I thought being different meant being alone. But yesterday, watching them laugh and connect, I realized it doesn't have to be that way. The words struck Alex deeply, and he felt a surge of respect for the strength she had built in the face of adversity. "You're an inspiration, Emily," he said quietly. "Not just to those kids, but to me, too." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, though she quickly masked it with a small smile. "Well, it's a team effort. You were there every step of the way." The warmth between them felt like something new, something fragile but real. Alex wondered if this was what friendship could be, a foundation built on shared pain, transformed into mutual understanding. But beneath the surface, he felt something deeper, a pull that went beyond friendship, though he didn't dare give voice to it. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emily settled into a steady rhythm, their friendship becoming a source of strength for both. They spent time together, sometimes working on smaller community projects, other times simply enjoying each other's company. The bond they shared grew with every conversation, every shared laugh, every silent moment of understanding. One evening, they found themselves at a park, sitting on a bench as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world. The air was thick with the scent of summer, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Emily's voice broke the silence, her tone contemplative. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? If we hadn't met again, or if high school had gone another way?" Alex took a deep breath, considering her words. "I think about it a lot," he admitted. "I wonder if I would have ever faced my past if I hadn't run into you. I was carrying all this guilt, but I kept pushing it down, pretending it didn't exist." He paused, glancing at her, his expression solemn. "But meeting you again, it forced me to see myself clearly, and as hard as it was, I'm grateful for it." Toward the end of the event, a young boy who had recently lost his sight approached Emily, his small hand reaching out. "Miss Emily," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'm scared that no one will see me for who I am anymore." Emily knelt down beside him, her voice soft and reassuring. "You're not alone," she told him, her words laced with a quiet strength. "People will see you for exactly who you are, and the ones who matter, they'll see you for all the wonderful things that make you, you." The boy smiled, his fears easing, and Alex felt a lump form in his throat. He realized in that moment just how much of an impact Emily had, not just on him, but on everyone around her. After the last of the guests left and the room began to empty, Alex approached her, his heart full. "Emily, this was incredible. You've done something amazing here." She smiled, exhaustion and pride etched into her face. "Thank you, Alex, and thank you for being part of this. I didn't think we'd ever—" Her voice trailed off, as if the words were too big, too complex to capture. Alex reached out, gently covering her hand with his own. "We've come a long way," he said quietly, "and I'm grateful for every moment of it." She looked at him, her gaze steady, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of something more, a trust that hadn't been there before, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection they'd built. In that moment, Alex knew that while forgiveness was a journey, they had taken the first steps together, and he was ready to continue that journey no matter where it led. The day after the event, Alex found himself standing in front of Emily's apartment building with a bag of pastries and 2 coffees. He hadn't planned on dropping by, but the quiet joy from yesterday's success lingered, and he wanted to share it with her, to express his gratitude in person. Emily opened the door, her expression softening as she saw him standing there. "You didn't have to do this," she said, though she was clearly pleased. He smiled, holding out the coffee. "After everything yesterday, I figured we could both use a break. And breakfast." They settled onto her couch, the morning light streaming through the windows. A comfortable silence fell between them, and Alex found himself savoring the peace. For so long he had been haunted by guilt and remorse, but now, sitting here with Emily, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't known he was missing. After a while, Emily broke the silence. "Yesterday was something special," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Those kids left with smiles on their faces. That's everything I could have hoped for." "You did that, Emily," Alex replied, his gaze warm. "You gave them a place to belong, something I know you didn't always have back then." She nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Maybe that's why it means so much to me. When I was younger, I thought being different meant being alone. But yesterday, watching them laugh and connect, I realized it doesn't have to be that way." The words struck Alex deeply, and he felt a surge of respect for the strength she had built in the face of adversity. "You're an inspiration, Emily," he said quietly. "Not just to those kids, but to me, too." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, though she quickly masked it with a small smile. "Well, it's a team effort. You were there every step of the way." The warmth between them felt like something new, something fragile but real. Alex wondered if this was what friendship could be. A foundation built on shared pain, transformed into mutual understanding. But beneath the surface, he felt something deeper, a pull that went beyond friendship, though he didn't dare give voice to it. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emily settled into a steady rhythm, their friendship becoming a source of strength for both. They spent time together, sometimes working on smaller community projects, other times simply enjoying each other's company. The bond they shared grew with every conversation, every shared laugh, every silent moment of understanding. One evening, they found themselves at a park, sitting on a bench as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world. The air was thick with the scent of summer, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Emily's voice broke the silence, her tone contemplative. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? If we hadn't met again, or if high school had gone another way?" Alex took a deep breath, considering her words. "I think about it a lot," he admitted. "I wonder if I would have ever faced my past if I hadn't run into you. I was carrying all this guilt, but I kept pushing it down, pretending it didn't exist." He paused, glancing at her, his expression solemn. "But meeting you again, it forced me to see myself clearly, and as hard as it was, I'm grateful for it." Emily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I think, in some strange way, this second chance was what I needed too. For so long I tried to forget high school, to pretend those years didn't happen. But seeing you again, it helped me face the parts of myself I had tried to ignore." Her words resonated with Alex, and he felt a sense of connection with her that went beyond words. They were both learning to confront their pasts, to make peace with who they had been and who they were becoming. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Alex reached over, his hand covering hers. She looked down, surprised, but didn't pull away. They sat in silence, the warmth of his hand a quiet reminder of the bond they had forged. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with unspoken words. Alex could feel the emotions building between them, something tentative, something unspoken but real. But Emily was the first to break the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Alex, thank you for all of this. I never thought I'd find someone who could understand." He smiled, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Thank you, Emily, for giving me the chance to try." They stayed there for a while, hand in hand, each finding a quiet peace in the other's presence. As their bond deepened, Alex felt his feelings for Emily growing, moving beyond friendship. But he kept those feelings carefully guarded, unsure if she would be ready to trust him with something so vulnerable. He didn't want to rush things, didn't want to risk ruining the delicate balance they had built. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. One afternoon, Alex received an unexpected call from his younger sister, Leah, who was in town for the weekend. Leah had always been perceptive, the kind of person who could read emotions like an open book. "So, tell me about this friend of yours," Leah said, an amused glint in her eyes as they sat across from each other at a cafe. "You've been talking about her non-stop." Alex hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Emily and we go way back. We knew each other in high school. I wasn't the best version of myself back then, and she was someone I hurt." He paused, feeling a pang of regret. "Now, I'm just trying to make things right." Leah watched him, her expression thoughtful. Sounds like there's more to it than just making things right. Do you have feelings for her? Alex's face reddened and he looked away, feeling exposed. I don't know, Leah. Maybe. But she's been through so much, and the last thing I want is to complicate her life. She's finally learning to trust me. I don't want to risk that. Leah nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. You know, sometimes the best relationships start as friendships. If you're honest with her and patient, maybe things will work out. Her words stayed with him as he left the cafe, his mind racing with possibilities. But just as he was beginning to entertain the thought of telling Emily how he felt, an unexpected encounter threw him off balance. Later that evening, Alex was on his way to meet Emily for dinner when he spotted a familiar face across the street. Paul, one of his old high school friends, and a major influence on his behavior back then. Paul hadn't changed much. He still carried himself with the same arrogant air, his smirk as familiar as the memories Alex had tried to leave behind. "Alex! Long time no see!" Paul called out, crossing the street with a grin that Alex found unsettling. "Paul," Alex replied, forcing a polite smile. He felt a surge of discomfort at the sight of his former friend, a reminder of the person he used to be. Paul looked him up and down, his eyes gleaming with a mischievous light. "Heard you've been hanging around with that Emily girl. Didn't we used to call her, what was it, the Invisible Girl?" Alex's face hardened, anger flaring up at Paul's mocking tone. "That was a long time ago," he said coldly. "People change." Paul chuckled, oblivious to Alex's irritation. "Maybe you have, but some things never do. I mean, come on, Alex. Are you really telling me you're best friends with her now?" "Actually, yeah, I am," Alex replied, his voice firm. "And I regret the way we treated her back then. If I could go back, I'd do things differently." Paul raised an eyebrow, his smirk fading slightly. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious." Alex's gaze was steady, his jaw set. "I'm done with the person I used to be. And if you can't respect that, maybe it's best if we keep our distance." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Paul standing in stunned silence. The encounter left him shaken, a reminder of the person he used to be, but also a testament to the growth he had fought so hard to achieve. When he met Emily that evening, she immediately sensed something was off. They sat across from each other, the flickering candlelight casting shadows over their faces as Alex recounted his encounter with Paul. "I ran into one of the guys from high school," he explained, his voice tense. It brought back a lot of things I'd rather forget." Emily listened, her expression thoughtful. "You don't have to be defined by who you were back then, Alex," she said gently. "You've already proven to me that you're not that person anymore." Her words soothed him, and he felt a sense of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Emily. I needed to hear that." They sat in silence, the weight of their shared past a quiet presence between them. But in that moment, Alex realized something. No matter how much pain and regret they carried, they were both learning to heal, to let go of the past and embrace the people they were becoming. And maybe, just maybe, they were ready to take a step forward together. As the weeks passed, Alex found himself drawn even closer to Emily, their time together becoming a natural part of his life. They continued working on smaller projects in the community, often spending late nights at the cafe planning events and sharing conversations that ran deeper than he'd ever anticipated. Yet, with each passing day, Alex's feelings grew stronger, evolving into something undeniable. He began to wonder if Emily sensed it too. The quiet shift in their dynamic, the unspoken feelings that hung in the spaces between their words. One evening, they were working at her apartment, sorting through feedback from the community event. Alex was engrossed in reading, but he could feel Emily's eyes on him. When he looked up, she quickly averted her gaze, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Is everything all right?" he asked, setting down the papers and giving her his full attention. She hesitated, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the table. "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "You've put so much into all of this, and I I don't think I've told you how much it means to me." Her words caught him off guard, and he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "Emily, you don't need to thank me. I wanted to do this. For you, and for myself, too, I think." She looked away, her gaze distant. "You've been kinder to me than I ever thought possible, and it makes me wonder, why?" The question hung between them, charged with the weight of unspoken emotions. He could feel his heart racing, the impulse to finally tell her the truth pressing down on him. "Because I care about you, Emily," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. "I don't know how it happened or when, but I know that I want to be part of your life, in whatever way you'll let me." Emily's face softened, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Alex, it's not that I don't feel something too. But I've built these walls for a reason. I don't know if I'm ready to let them down yet." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand, and I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me." They sat in silence, each processing the weight of their own feelings. For the first time, Alex felt the ache of longing mingled with uncertainty, a fragile hope tempered by the realization that she might never be ready to fully open up to him. Over the next few days, their interactions became a little strained, their usual ease replaced by a tension neither of them could shake. Emily was more reserved, her walls creeping back up, and Alex worried that his confession had unsettled the delicate balance they'd built. One afternoon, while working on another community project, Emily pulled him aside. She seemed nervous, her hands clasped together tightly as she looked at him. "I know things have been complicated between us," she began, her voice hesitant. "And I just wanted to explain. It's not that I don't appreciate what we have. I've learned that letting people in can hurt, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to go through that again." Her words stung, but Alex understood. He reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I don't want you to do anything that doesn't feel right, Emily. If friendship is all you can offer, then that's enough for me." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alex. I don't know if anyone's ever been this patient with me before." He gave her a reassuring smile, though he couldn't ignore the ache of disappointment in his chest. As much as he wanted more, he knew that her comfort and trust mattered more than his own desires. One evening, Emily invited Alex to attend a charity gala for a cause related to her work. He gladly accepted, eager for the chance to support her, but as they entered the elegantly decorated ballroom, he realized just how out of place he felt. The room was filled with well-dressed strangers, the air thick with the hum of polite conversations and laughter. As they found their seats, Emily's demeanor shifted, her confidence blossoming as she mingled with guests and shared her story. Watching her, Alex felt a surge of pride, yet also a pang of regret. This was her world, a place where she thrived, and he couldn't help but wonder if he truly fit into it. During a quiet moment, Emily pulled him aside, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you for coming with me, Alex. It means a lot." "Of course," he replied, smiling warmly. "I wouldn't miss it." They stood together, watching the crowd when Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "I never thought I'd feel comfortable in places like this, you know. Back in high school, I would have been terrified just to be here." Alex's gaze softened, and he felt a swell of admiration. "You've come so far, Emily. You're incredible." She smiled, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "I still get nervous, but I think being here with you makes it easier." They shared a moment of quiet understanding, the world around them fading into the background as they stood side by side. As they left the gala later that night, the air was thick with unspoken words. The streets were quiet, illuminated by soft streetlights that cast a warm glow over them as they walked together, their steps in sync. At her apartment door, they paused, the silence between them heavy with possibility. Alex looked at her, his heart pounding as he searched her face, wondering if she felt it too. The pull between them, the way her eyes lingered just a little longer than usual. "Emily," he whispered, his voice barely audible. But before he could finish, she stepped forward, her fingers brushing his arm, her gaze filled with a mixture of longing and hesitation. "Alex," she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know if I'm ready, but if I was, you'd be the one." The words filled him with both hope and heartbreak. He felt the weight of her emotions, the struggle she faced in letting someone into the carefully guarded space she had built around herself. He leaned forward, his lips just a breath away from hers, his hand resting on her shoulder. But he stopped, feeling the slight tension in her posture, the way her fingers clutched the fabric of her dress. Instead, he placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, his heart aching with the unspoken promise that one day, maybe, they could be more. "Good night, Emily," he whispered, stepping back, his heart heavy yet filled with a quiet resolve. "Good night, Alex," she replied, her voice soft but steady, her eyes reflecting the unspoken connection they both felt. The following week, as a way of giving Emily space, Alex decided to put his feelings into words. He wrote her a series of letters, expressing the depth of his feelings without expecting anything in return. He kept the letters short and heartfelt, sharing moments that had changed him, memories of their shared journey, and his hopes for her happiness, even if he could never be part of it. He didn't send them, instead tucking them away, each letter becoming a quiet tribute to his love for her. It was his way of releasing the feelings that had grown so strong, a way of respecting her boundaries while acknowledging the impact she had on his life. But one day, as he left her apartment after another long day of working on a project, he accidentally left one of the letters behind. Emily found it later that night, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the paper. His words were raw, vulnerable, filled with an honesty that touched her deeply. She read each line, her heart pounding as she felt the depth of his feelings, the sincerity behind each word. As she held the letter close, a tear slipped down her cheek. She hadn't realized just how much he cared, how much he was willing to give without expecting anything in return. The next time they met, Emily was quieter than usual, her gaze often drifting to Alex with an intensity he hadn't seen before. They worked in comfortable silence, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Finally, as they were finishing up, she reached out, her hand covering his. "Alex," she began, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I found the letter you left behind." His heart skipped a beat, his face flushing with embarrassment. "Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to see that." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Don't be sorry. Your words, they meant more to me than you know." They held each other's gaze, and Alex felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, they were both ready to take a step forward. In that moment, he realized that love wasn't just about romance or passion. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to wait, even when the path forward was uncertain. And as Emily's fingers tightened around his, he knew he was willing to wait as long as it took. Months passed, and the rhythm of Alex and Emily's lives settled into a comfortable, familiar pattern. They continued working on community projects, each new endeavor reinforcing the bond they had built through trust, patience, and understanding. Emily's walls slowly lowered, piece by piece, her quiet smiles and thoughtful glances hinting at the trust she had finally found in him. One evening, as they sat together on a park bench under the stars, Emily turned to him, her expression open and unguarded. "Alex, I never thought I could feel this way about someone," she whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability and hope. "You've shown me what kindness can be, what forgiveness can mean. You've helped me see myself, not as broken, but as whole." He took her hand, his gaze unwavering. "Emily, I found my own healing in knowing you. You helped me see that I could be better, that I could make amends, and you showed me what true strength looks like." They sat in silence, the weight of the past fading as they looked toward a future filled with new possibilities. Alex knew he didn't need a grand declaration. He was willing to wait, to let their story unfold naturally. And as they walked hand in hand beneath the streetlights, they each felt a peace that had eluded them for years. In the months and years that followed, Alex and Emily continued to work side by side, their partnership blossoming into a love that was as resilient as the journey that had brought them together. They transformed their community, inspiring others to embrace kindness, compassion, and second chances. Their story became a quiet testament to the power of change, the reminder that forgiveness is possible, that people can grow, and that love often blooms in the most unexpected places. If you've been moved by Alex and Emily's journey, remember that everyone carries a story and that kindness can change lives. Share this story with others who need a reminder of the power of forgiveness and the courage it takes to transform. Let's spread compassion and hope, like Alex and Emily did, and create a world where everyone has a second chance to grow and heal. Subscribe and share this story to keep their message alive and be the change that brings healing and understanding into someone's life.